Welcome everybody to the Aircenter Criterium Challenge. This is Training to Win Part 2. You are listening to the default audio track, which includes instructional narrative. If you'd like to turn off the narrative, simply press the audio button on your DVD remote and you'll hear the music. Press it one more time and the music will turn off and you'll just hear the sounds of the ride. So I'm going to briefly introduce you to the dashboard display. This one's fairly intuitive. There's not a lot of data on here, mostly because the course is flat. And what we have, starting on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that we're at 61% of max. That's our heart rate. And so right now we're just kind of rolling along fairly gently, keeping it in easy gear. And you'll notice on the right hand side we're at a 1 out of 10. So we should be in our easiest gear. Just slowly working up the heart rate. On the bottom of the screen, you'll notice a graph. Looks like a hill, but it's our heart rate. And you're going to see that basically the heart rate right now we're in a green zone, fairly easy. To the very left of the graph there, you'll see 2 black bars. And what's in between those black bars is basically our position along that graph. So right now we've jumped into a 4 out of 10 for the resistance. That's because we're up front, taking a little pull, and we're going to back it off down to a 1 or 2 out of 10. As we slowly drift in behind the pack. Keeping our cadence pretty gentle, not real fast. We're going to pick that up in a little bit, but right now we're just warming up the legs. Well, this is a Criterium training ride at the Procrastinating Peddlers of Reno, Nevada, host every Wednesday. And it's a fun group ride designed for beginning cyclists as well as more advanced cyclists. And basically, as the ride progresses, it gets harder and harder. And what you have remaining at the end of the ride are the faster cyclists. So what we do is we start up nice and slow, warm up the legs, and in about 20 minutes or so, we're going to pick up the pace and make it a little more difficult. But this is a training ride for a Criterium type racing. This is one of my favorite events. I really enjoy the crits. A lot of strategy involved, a lot of work. and it's fun and fast with a exciting sprint finish. And every single time you do a crit race, it's different from the time before. So watching our heart rate, we're still below 70. Well, now we just jumped up to 71 and add a little resistance. So we catch up to the back of this wheel here. Today's ride is about an hour. I'm going to try to knock out some strategies for training for Criterium races, as well as strategies that you might want to implement if you actually find yourself racing a crit. You know, for the first thing, really for riding in a crit is being comfortable in a pack with a group of people. Can't be shy. We need to learn how to ride up close to the person in front of us, maintaining a clearance of 6 inches to a foot, depending on the winds, depending on your speed, and how much draft you really want to get. But riding close without overlapping wheels, a real good thing to practice. If you have a group of friends or somebody who you trust and can ride a straight line without too many changes in speed or direction, and really practice on getting right up to that wheel and trying to get as close as you can. And then at the same time, you can even practice other techniques like bumping wheels. This is something that we want to do intentionally, because if you actually find yourself bumping wheels in a race or a ride, you don't want to panic and go over the wheel and wind up falling off the bike. And so you can actually practice this technique by riding alongside a cyclist and make sure they're holding a straight line, and just tap your front wheel against their back wheel and let it bounce off and take you away. Then go in again and just tap and bounce away. Additionally to that, you might want to practice bumping shoulders, because this happens all the time in a crit. So ride right alongside your friend and just lean into him and let him or her lean into you and bump shoulders. You can even push each other a little bit and see how that feels. Ultimately, you want to be comfortable riding up close to people. You want to be comfortable touching. Handlebars touch a lot. We have to be careful about crossing brake levers and handlebars, because that gets a little more challenging to get out of that situation. Working up the heart rate to 75% of max, increasing our cadence just a little bit. At 90 RPM, the speed of the ride is picking up just a bit. Another good training tactic for racing crits, of course, is the interval, but specifically the sprint interval. And a sprint interval is a little bit different from your other types of intervals where you're going 15 seconds and resting for a couple minutes. A sprint interval is going as hard as you can for 30 seconds, which is about what you need to do to cover your sprint distance. Going all out and then resting for about between 5 to 10 minutes. What we want to do is we want to recover legs and heart so that we can apply maximum effort on the sprint out and try to get our top speed at the same time, and practice that. Practice getting that heart rate up above 100% or to it. You'd be surprised what you can accomplish when you really put yourself into a sprint. And while you're doing that, what you want to practice is, or what you want to look at is, at how long can you maintain that maximum effort. You know, you're sprinting, you're going 100%, and your heart rate takes about 30 seconds to catch up to your power out. So in about 30 seconds, all of a sudden, your heart rate's showing 100% of max, and you want to see how long you can hold it there, and you want to see what your speed is. And during that process, if you have the opportunity to look at your speedometer, you want to see at what point during your sprint you're hitting your max velocity. Because, and then at the same time, you know, you're finding your maximum velocity. How long can you hold that maximum velocity? Because basically, it's that cushion between the start of your maximum velocity and at the end of your maximum velocity where you're dead. There's that small window where you want to be crossing the finish line within that window. So while you're practicing your sprint intervals, look at your top velocity, find out how long it takes you to get to that, and find out how long you can sustain it. Back up front, add a smidge of resistance. We're not going too hard here, keeping the cadence up to 90. And bring it back down. We're still warming up. We got a few more minutes. See where that green part on the graph disappears, goes to yellow. We'll pick it up a little bit there. And I'll jump into the orange, which is around 90% or better. And then at the end of that graph, where it's red, that's our sprint. It's 100%. So you're looking for your top speed, and you can experiment with different things like what position your body should be in during these sprints. Where's your maximum velocity at? Are you sitting in the saddle in the drops? Are you out of the saddle? And if you observe some of the great sprinters of our days, they all have a little bit different sprinting style. For example, Tyler Farrar, he can get up to about 50 on a flat road in a sprint. He'll typically be sprinting with his hands in the drops and his butt out of the saddle, but he's pretty close to the saddle and he's trying to stay low and tucked, elbows bent, and he's just piling on massive power and pressure on those pedals. Whereas Tor Hushoff, for example, might start his sprint out of the saddle, but he'll finish it in the saddle or close to it, just grinding away. Mark Cavendish, very similar sprint to Farrar. So there's very differing styles, but not a whole lot of difference. Mostly it's power, acceleration, and time and distance, how long you can maintain that maximum effort at, and where you're at your max speed. Now, as a rule of thumb, you want to maintain a high cadence while you're getting ready to sprint or before the sprint. So if you're riding along like right now, we're maintaining a cadence of 90. When we're actually racing, it'll be closer to 105, 110. So we're reserving that power, the low cadence, the mashing on the pedals with as much power as we got. We're saving that for the end. So we're trying to save our legs here, at the same time trying not to work too hard, keeping our heart rate at a controlled level. Other things you can do to train or practice for a crit. If you've got a group of friends or a cycling group, there's a lot of fun training games you can play. Like the missing out, for example, is one. That's a fun one. And a missing out is basically, say you start out with 10 riders and you're doing laps like we're doing here. What you try and do is you try not to be last across each finish. Picking up our cadence here. So you try not to be last across the line. If you are last, then you're out. If you're not last, you keep racing another lap. And of course you try to be the last person standing to win the game. Another fun thing to do is basically have two people side by side at a standstill. Somebody behind you holding your bike up, so it's like a track race. And you pick a quarter mile, have a fixed gear or gear restriction, so you're both in the same resistance basically, and then see who crosses the finish line first. In a quarter mile you can do all sorts of fun little things like track stands, try and get the person in front of you, or surprise them and just blast out and hold that sprint to the finish. While you're training, practice drafting. Getting up close to people is just a part of the discipline of drafting. Drafting requires an ability to kind of sense where the wind is coming from. And this is a great course because off to the left there is a wind barrier for the jets, so they don't blow the trucks over, I'm assuming. But we always get a crosswind out of the northwest there, and we get behind that barrier and that crosswind turns into a headwind, and then right about here it's turning into a tailwind. And so we change our position behind the rider in front of us constantly throughout the crit. It's never the same place twice. And now we've got to crosswind from the right, and we're going to echelon a little bit to the left of the cyclist in front of us. And those buildings to the right, they provide kind of a barrier. So we'll intermittently have a headwind, and then we'll come between the buildings, and we'll see a crosswind again. And so it's always changing, and you're always fishing for the perfect spot or the best spot. Sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, sometimes immediately behind. And learning where that wind is at can help you win a race. Cadence dropping here just a little bit. So resistance is changing a lot, and that's as a result of the different positions that we are behind the cyclists in front of us. And the winds here are kind of weird. Then of course, before you actually race a race, learn the course that you're going to be racing on. Go out with a few people so you can experiment with the wind directions, see if there's any weird things happening. With the wind, that is. Look for problems with the road, things that you want to avoid if you're racing. Find out how fast you can take certain corners, and then look for a start point for your sprint. So you only have X amount of time. 30 seconds is what I have right about. Find out at what point you need to start to crank it up for 30 seconds, hit your max speed, cross the finish line first. For me, it's that little box to the right and just passing up right about here. This is where I start, but it'll vary from race to race, and depending on whether you're in a pack, whether you're with just one or two people. So it's a dynamic thing. But you should know where you want to start your sprint at, how long you got, and pre-writing the course will help you do that. Bike handling is a very important part of this event. So obviously you're riding close to people. You're accelerating and slowing constantly. You're pedaling and coasting. And you're not using your brakes. The brakes are a last resort, but I can almost guarantee you, if you hit your brakes, some family man behind you is going to crash. Now hit your wheel and you'll take him down, or her. And that's just no way to go on a recreational, fun, non-paid event. The pros take bigger chances, take bigger risks, get in bigger crashes, but for the sake of our training here, we're going to assume that we're recreational riders, entertaining the thought of racing, or we're Cat 4, Cat 3, just trying to get in a workout. But regardless, we don't want to crash. But just in case we do, we should shave up those legs. little more resistance here. We're pulling our heart rate up to close to 90%. The race is almost on. You can also learn to drink strategically. We really don't want to drink too much on a crit. Just sip away, regular intervals. Let's get that cadence up. 105. Picking up our speed. We just don't want too much water in the gut when we're sprinting hard. We don't want cramps from drinking too much water. So those are some of the things you can try to train for your crits. But while we're actually racing, a few extra rules apply. First, refuel, fuel and hydrate before the race. A couple hours, pre-hydrate. Shouldn't have more than one small water bottle with you during the race. In the last 10 minutes or so, you might want to just throw that water bottle away. Nice high cadence here. That heart rate up to 90. Prior to the race, inflate your tires to their max, 120. For clinchers, 140, I'm guessing. For sew-ups. Show up early to the race. Get a nice warm-up. Get your number. You got to warm up before the race. Anxiety is your main enemy. Things will just go wrong if you're too nervous. Good way to get rid of those butterflies is do a few warm-up laps, half an hour or so. And then it also gives you a chance to ride the course again and see who's there. Scope out the field. Find out who you're racing. Look for people who can beat you on the same level as you can be, or be beaten. I guess if you're not a sprinter, look for other people who aren't sprinters. See if you can work together, put together a breakaway or something. Although those are really hard to pull off. If you are a sprinter, take a look around and see who else there has got some power. And if it's your first race, probably don't know anybody, but as you learn the field, you'll see the same people and you'll know who's who. When they line you up and on the line, try and stay up front. But more importantly, have some elbow room. Make sure you have some space between you, the person next to you, because a lot of crashes happen right off the start. People can't click in, they're looking at their pedals instead of the person in front of them. All sorts of fun things. So have some space. But if you can get the front, that's better, because ultimately at the start of the ride, you want to be at the front end of the main field. You don't want to be at the very front. You want to be 8 to 12 riders back. But most amateur races start out real fast. So everybody's just got a belly full of fire, lots of excitement, and the first 10 minutes goes fast. And you may have to really work to stay with the pack. So wherever you can hang out, hang out. I use caution, because if you're too far to the back and a weaker rider loses the wheel in front of them, or maybe a nice gap that you're going to have to make up and use a lot of effort to try to bridge across to the other pack. If that happens, there's probably going to be other people in that group with you who are trying to do the same thing. So get on one of those wheels. Try not to be up front. If at all possible, if you are a sprinter, you never want the front. You want to hang out behind somebody the whole time. We're taking pulls here only because this is a training ride, but it does get aggressive, and pretty soon our pulls are going to be pretty weak, so we're not going to help the person behind us go any faster. So now you're up front, you're in the top 15% of the front pack there, with only a dozen or so riders in front of you. Or if you're in the middle, what you want to do is you want to work your way up to that front spot, to where you're like 5th to 8th position, and try to maintain that position. And this is where that bike handling and bumping elbows really comes into play. So as you're passing people, they might not want to get past, and you might want to just push them aside and let them know you're coming through. Once you find your spot up front, if you see somebody you know, or there's another rider that you've raced before who's fast and can help you win, get on that wheel and just stay on it for the rest of the race until it's time to finish it off. Keep it nice and tight so people won't try and sneak in front of you. It's like this guy here. If we're ever racing, I look for him. He's smooth, he's fast, he's strong. He's not a good sprinter, but he can do a good lead out. It's important to stay calm, ride safe, Ride straight. Don't be wiggly. Don't be overly aggressive. Don't use your brakes. Drink water. One sip at a time. Don't take pulls. The only time you should pull is if, let's say, you're working with somebody at a breakaway. You get up front. You guys got to share the work to stay in front of the peloton, in front of the pack. So they're almost always going to be faster than you. But if you get a big enough gap and you guys are working together good, you might not have much left for the sprint, but you'll place high in the finish. I had one race where I was pretty exhausted to start. Had just raced a previous stage, like an hour previous. Went up to 100% on that. Now I'm starting out a new one, and I was too tired to take the front or be aggressive. So I hung out in the back. They never split apart. People were kind of tired to begin with. Then with about 2 laps to go, a buddy of mine, Dave Fish, who's a great time trialer, made his move from behind me, slowly went out around the outside. I got on his wheel. We did 1 lap, and we were in the front of the pack. And he pulled away from the pack. 2nd lap, with a half a lap, he was giving me the hand signal to move forward, to take a pull. I looked behind me, nobody was there. Had a half a lap left. I told him no way. He yelled, got mad, accelerated. I stayed on his wheel. In the last corner, I sprinted, took the stage, took the win. That was fun. He was mad, but he still got me free pizza. So learning your opponents is a really good thing. You know what they can do. Now, if I tried to take a pull from Dave, there'd been no way. I would have been too zonked by the end to do anything meaningful. But I knew I had 30 seconds of sprint in me, and I was going to take full advantage of that. Now, when you're in the group, there's a few techniques to psych your opponents out. One technique might be to show that you're not suffering at all. Discourage them. But what I like to do even more is sandbag, or basically pretend that I'm really struggling and I'm not going to be able to stay with the group, let alone sprint. Make your main competitor overconfident, so he'll or she'll take the front, and then you surprise them. Say, I wasn't feeling so bad. Stay on the wheel, Last 30 seconds. Take your sprint, pull ahead, hopefully win the race. So that's sandbagging. Heart rate's nice and high. It's going to peak out a couple times here. We're going to have to close the gap up pretty soon. We're going to have to work for it. See a little orange band to the right of the indicator on the graph. So once we get up to that point, it gets a little harder. I'm not going to be instructing so much. So I'm riding right along with you. Now if you know somebody in the group who you want to work with who will give you a lead out, that could be really helpful. And a lead out is simply where it's basically a pre-sprint. Person who is helping you wants to help you win. What they'll do is let you take their wheel, and then at the precise moment they start their sprint. You stay on that wheel, and then where it's your turn to sprint, you pull around them and take your sprint, and hope you have the power to hold off anybody who's behind you, or power to pass anybody who's up front. Typically a lead out is real advantageous because they'll put you in the front. You'll be number 2 or number 3 from the start of the sprint. Okay, big ring up front here. Working harder. Heart rate's not right. Keep it around 90, 93, 94. Keep that cadence up. Now if there's another sprinter in that pack, here we're working for the wheel here. Get up to it. Got 10 minutes left. And take some off. Find somebody else who sprints in your group. I always let them lead me out if I can take that wheel, and if they don't know me well enough that they're going to be aggressive and trying to win on their own power, I'll come around them. Win a lot of stages that way. Now, inexperienced riders tend to start their sprint too early. They get excited. They know the end or the finish is right there, and they'll break too soon. Best thing to do is follow the wheel in front of you, or bridge up to the next wheel and draft until you've reached your sprint point, and then just pull around them. And sometimes it can be easy. You're hopping from wheel to wheel, as with most crit races without professionals. There's a lot of stagger, a lot of differences in ability. So you just go from wheel to wheel, put your head down, and pedal through the finish. And it's never easy, mind you. Every single sprint finish I've ever done, I'm always at 100% of max, or I've discovered a new max that I didn't realize I had. Let's keep that cadence up there, 100. Still in a draft here. This is Paul in front of us. He's a horrible sprinter, but he's got a lot of staying power. If there's ever a gap, I always let him bridge me up to it. And I think he helps me out here, as a matter of fact. Now we're up front. We're actually taking it a little easier here, bringing the resistance down, bringing the cadence down. The guys behind me want to beat me. Stay on that wheel. Nice high cadence. Sip water. We got the front here. Don't get too aggressive. We're fighting the wind a little bit. Got the sun in our eye. We're looking at the time. We know that the final sprint is almost here. Try and keep the legs fresh. And don't hit that 100% until you have to. There's only a few of us left. We're not getting too many breaks. We got Dan, who's a good sprinter, in here with us. We got Paul, who's a great sustained rider, and the guy up front, he's a great all-around cyclist, excellent breakaway, excellent time trial. We got Tilo in the purple jersey up front, and he can hurt us with this sustained high efforts, breakaway power. We don't want to play that game with them. Not if we're trying to win a sprint. Use these opportunities up front to actually rest. Those guys just want to hurt me, so they're going to accelerate when they come past, and I got to catch back up. like right here. On 2 minutes, I do want to see you hit your max. Look at this, we're just totally sandbagging here. I want you to hit your max. When the timer counts down to 0, I want you out of the saddle, putting everything you got into those pedals. And that's your last 30. We're not going to have a whole lot, as you'll see. Sandbagging here. Okay, now the guy up front's going to pick it up here. I think that's Paul. Get on those pedals. Accelerate. Keeping that cadence up. Use a higher resistance if you need to, get that heart rate up. Back up front here, we want to find a wheel. Oh shoot, there he goes. Big gear up front. Let's crank it up. Get that cadence up. Add some resistance. Gotta get to this wheel here, Dan's wheel. He's giving us a lead. He's trying to pull us back up. Don't let him down. Get on that wheel. Hold it. Pile it on. Let's go. Take this corner, come out of it, 10 out of 10, get out of the saddle, let's go. Keep it up. Ah, there it is. Recover. A soft pedal. Well, hope you hit your max. I did. Again. And I'm going to do a couple laps here. Recover. Real important. Bring the heart rate down. Don't get off the bike. until you see the credits roll. We got a beautiful sunset. So there you go. Crit Racing 101. Keep in mind, everybody races differently. Everybody has different strengths. If you're a sprinter, you're going to try one tactic. And if you're not a sprinter, try something different. If you're a hill climber, he'll probably just try and stay in the pack. Well, this is BitBop signing out. Thank you very much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you on Training to Win 3. This is BitBop out.